We're incredibly grateful for your support. Before we begin today's tale, tell us, which city or country are you joining us from? We love connecting with our global audience. Now let's dive into today's story. James Morrison stood at his office window, surveying the Boston skyline he had helped shape over 2 decades. At 45, his muscular frame filled out his tailored suit with the same commanding presence that had intimidated competitors since he'd started Morrison Construction and Development. The reflection in the glass showed a man whose sharp features and steel-gray eyes conveyed authority without effort. He traced his finger along the edge of his mahogany desk, remembering the cheap particle board furniture from his first office. The memory of his father's bankruptcy still burned fresh, even after 30 years. That day had transformed 12-year-old James forever, watching the bailiffs strip their home bare while his father broke down. The lesson had been carved into his soul. Never trust fate, never leave anything to chance, always have a plan. The Jenkins contract is ready for your signature, Mr. Morrison, Patricia Corden announced, entering his office with her characteristic precision. At 52, his CFO carried herself with the bearing of a general, her auburn hair streaked with dignified silver that matched her sharp business attire. James turned, studying the document she placed before him. The contingency clauses? Triple-checked and ironclad, Patricia confirmed, her voice carrying the confidence of their 15-year partnership. Benjamin reviewed them personally. Benjamin Hawthorne, their corporate lawyer, had been another crucial piece in James's arsenal. Together, they constructed a business empire that could withstand any storm. You've seen the trust modifications? James asked, signing the contract with practiced efficiency. Patricia nodded. The new structure is brilliant. Even if someone managed to penetrate the primary accounts, the secondary and tertiary protections would activate automatically. She paused, adjusting her glasses. Though I have to ask, what prompted these additional safeguards? James's jaw tightened imperceptibly. Business is war, Patricia. You taught me that, and war requires preparation. She completed their long-standing mantra. But these specific protections, they're designed for something more personal than corporate raiders. James stood, walking to the wall, where architectural drawings of their latest projects hung like battle plans. When my father lost everything, it wasn't just bad luck or poor planning. His partner, his best friend, had been embezzling for years. The bankruptcy was just the finale. Patricia's eyes narrowed. You've never mentioned that before. Because the lesson matters more than the story, James replied, his voice carrying the weight of steel. Trust is earned, not given. And betrayal. He turned, fixing Patricia with a gaze that had made grown men flinch. Betrayal must be anticipated and crushed without mercy. The intercom buzzed, interrupting their conversation. Mr. Morrison, your wife is here. Victoria swept into the office moments later, her presence transforming the space with practiced ease. At 42, she carried herself with the grace of the artist she was, her dark hair and elegant features still as striking as when James had first met her at that charity gala 17 years ago. James, darling, she smiled, crossing the room to kiss his cheek. Patricia, how lovely to see you. Patricia nodded professionally, gathering the contracts. Mrs. Morrison, I'll have these filed immediately, James. As Patricia left, Victoria perched on the edge of James's desk. I thought we could have lunch. It's been ages since we've done that. James studied his wife, noting the subtle changes in her behavior over recent months. The increased interest in his business, the charitable endeavors aligned with Morrison Construction's projects, the casual questions about company structure. To others, it might have seemed like a wife taking more interest in her husband's work. To James, it was a deviation from pattern that demanded investigation. I have meetings all afternoon, he replied, watching her reaction carefully. But tell me about your morning. How was your session with Richard? Oh, you know how personal trainers are, Victoria laughed lightly. Richard pushes me harder every time, but the results are worth it, don't you think? James smiled, revealing nothing of his thoughts about Richard Maxwell, the trainer Victoria had hired 3 years ago at Equinox Fitness. The same time frame as their Harbor Heights development project. The same time frame as the subtle shifts in company probings that Benjamin had reported. Grace mentioned you missed her architectural competition, James said, maintaining his casual tone. Victoria's expression flickered briefly. The charity event couldn't be rescheduled. You know how these things are, darling. But I sent her my love. Of course, James nodded, remembering Grace's face when she realized her mother wouldn't be there to see her win first place. His 15-year-old daughter had inherited his strategic mind along with her mother's artistic talent, channeling both into architectural designs that already showed remarkable promise. The intercom buzzed again. Mr. Morrison, Detective Torres is here. Send him in, James called out, noting how Victoria's posture shifted slightly at the mention of his old friend. Michael Torres entered with the confident stride of a man who'd worked his way up from beat cop to head of Boston PD's financial crimes unit. His police suit was as crisp as James's business attire, though it covered a frame that still reflected their shared boxing sessions at the gym. James, Michael nodded, then turned to Victoria. Mrs. Morrison. Detective, Victoria smiled, standing gracefully. I'll leave you boys to your business. James, dinner at 7? James watched her leave, the subtle sway of her hips practiced to perfection. Once the door closed, Michael's expression turned serious. We need to talk, he said, dropping into one of the office chairs. About Victoria, James leaned back, his face unreadable. What have you found? Michael pulled out his phone, bringing up several photos. Your wife's new trainer? He doesn't exist, at least not as Richard Maxwell. My contacts in white collar ran his prints through the system. You're looking at Robert Maddox, a sophisticated confidence man with connections to at least 3 major fraud operations in the past decade. James absorbed the information without visible reaction, though his mind was already racing through contingencies. The charity events? Fronts, Michael confirmed. Some legitimate, some not. But they're all connected to a network of shell companies and art galleries. Your wife's friend Sophia Reeves? The gallery owner? She's Robert's sister, running a money laundering operation through art sales. James stood, moving to his private bar to pour 2 glasses of scotch. The Harbor Heights project? They're planning something big, Michael nodded, accepting the drink. The timing of funds transfers the size of the project. It's perfect cover for major fraud. But James, he leaned forward, his voice dropping. Victoria's not just an innocent pawn in this. She's been actively involved from the beginning. James took a slow sip of his scotch, savoring the burn. Show me. Michael placed a USB drive on the desk. Financial records, surveillance photos, recorded conversations. They've been planning this for years, James. Victoria was specifically chosen because of her connection to you. And Grace? Your daughter's trust is secure, Michael assured him. Whatever they're planning, they can't touch those funds. But James, he hesitated. This goes deeper than money. The way Victoria talks about you in these recordings, it's cold, calculated. James set his glass down with deliberate care. Thank you, Michael. I'll need everything you can get me on their operation. Every detail, every connection. Already on it, Michael stood, straightening his jacket. But James, when this breaks, when you move against them, I can't be officially involved. The department will never know your role, James finished. This is personal, and personal matters require a personal touch. After Michael left, James remained at his desk, reviewing the files with methodical precision. Each document, each photo, each recorded conversation built a picture of betrayal so complete it would have shattered a lesser man. But James Morrison had spent his life preparing for exactly this moment. He pressed the intercom. Give me Patricia and Benjamin. Immediately, within minutes, his CFO and lawyer were seated before him, reviewing the evidence with professional detachment. The company's secure, Patricia confirmed, her voice tight with controlled anger. The new protocols we implemented last quarter were actually better protected than ever. Benjamin nodded, his legal mind already mapping strategies. They've been probing our trust structures, but hitting walls at every turn. The documentation is buried so deep, even I need 3 separate keys to access it. What's our exposure? James asked, his voice eerily calm. Minimal, Patricia replied. The Harbor Heights project has triple authentication on all transfers. Even if they manage to divert funds, Our holding accounts would flag and freeze any suspicious movements. And Victoria's personal access? Benjamin smiled thinly. Remember that refinancing paperwork she signed 3 years ago? The house, the cars, even her art studio, everything's in Grace's trust. Victoria's name isn't on any of it. James stood, walking to the window where Boston's financial district spread out before him like a battlefield. They'll move soon. The first major funds transfer for Harbor Heights is scheduled for next week. Your orders? Patricia asked, her tone making it clear she was ready for war. Let them think they're winning, James replied, his reflection in the glass showing a smile that would have terrified Victoria had she seen it. Let them think everything's going according to plan. And when they make their move, he turned, fixing his most trusted lieutenants with a gaze that held no mercy. We'll show them what happens to those who dare betray James Morrison. The sun was setting over Boston as Patricia and Benjamin left, casting James's office in deepening shadows. He remained at his desk, reviewing years of careful preparation that would soon prove their worth. On his computer screen, a photo of Victoria and Grace at last year's Christmas party seemed to mock him with its false happiness. Let them come, he thought, his fingers running over the USB drive Michael had left. Let them try their worst. They would learn, as his father's betrayer had learned, that some men are simply too dangerous to cross. The intercom buzzed one final time. Sir, your daughter's here. Grace entered, her young face bright with excitement, clutching architectural drawings that probably represented her latest design inspiration. James felt his expression soften, the only genuine warmth he'd shown all day. For her, he thought, watching her spread the drawings across his desk. For her, he would make sure the lesson was unforgettable. Those who would harm his family would learn that James Morrison didn't just defeat his enemies. He destroyed them. Robert Maddox, known to the world as Richard Maxwell, stood in the private training room of Equinox Fitness, watching Victoria Morrison complete her cool-down routine. 3 years of careful planning had led to this moment, and he couldn't help but admire the precision with which everything had fallen into place. Your form is perfect, he commented, maintaining his professional trainer persona despite the intimate nature of their relationship. James must appreciate the results of our sessions. Victoria's laugh held a note of contempt that would have shocked Boston's social circles. James barely notices. He's too busy fortifying his precious empire. She stretched languidly, her expensive workout gear highlighting the results of their training. Speaking of which, I have something you'll want to see. She retrieved her phone, pulling up documents she'd photographed in James's home office. The Harbor Heights project specifications. Every detail, including the transfer schedules. Robert took the phone, his practiced eye scanning the information while maintaining awareness of their surroundings. The gym's security cameras had been on a convenient loop for months, thanks to Dominic Walsh's technical expertise, but habit had kept him alive in this business. Impressive, he murmured, sending the photos through their secure channel to Dominic. And James suspects nothing? Please, Victoria scoffed, beginning her stretches. He's actually pleased that I'm taking an interest in his work. Men like James are all the same, so convinced of their own brilliance that they never see the knife until it's in their back. Robert studied her with professional appreciation. Victoria had proven to be more than just their access point to Morrison Construction. Her natural talent for deception, her ability to maintain her social facade while systematically betraying her husband. It was almost artistic. The charity gala tomorrow night, he said, helping her with her shoulder stretch, using the contact to maintain their chemistry. Everything's in place? Victoria's smile held genuine pleasure. Sophia's outdone herself. Half of Boston's elite will be there, laundering their money through overpriced art while pretending to care about underprivileged children. She lowered her voice, though they were alone. The fake Monet is already drawing attention. By the time anyone realizes it's worthless, we'll be long gone with the Harbor Heights money. Later that evening, Robert met with Dominic Walsh in their secure office, disguised as a tech startup in Cambridge. Dominic's workspace reflected his personality. Multiple screens displaying code, security feeds, and financial data, all carefully protected from outside observation. The Morrison financial structure is unlike anything I've seen, Dominic admitted, pulling up complex diagrams. Every time I think I've mapped their security, another layer appears. It's like they're expecting someone to try exactly what we're planning. Robert leaned over Dominic's shoulder, studying the displays. James Morrison's reputation isn't just for show. His father's bankruptcy taught him paranoia early. He pointed to one of the diagrams. Focus on the Harbor Heights transfer protocols. That's our window. Already on it, Dominic typed rapidly, bringing up new screens. Victoria's access codes get us through the first level. The timing has to be perfect. The moment the legitimate transfers begin, our system diverts a percentage through the shell companies. Small enough to avoid immediate detection. Large enough to make it worth the risk. How much? 12 million minimum, Dominic grinned. By the time anyone realizes, the money will have bounced through so many accounts it'll be impossible to trace. Robert's phone buzzed Victoria, sending her daily update. The message made him smile. James is working late again. Apparently, the poor man's tired of his wife's disinterest in intimacy. If he only knew. Across town, Sophia Reeves supervised the final preparations for her gallery's charity event. The space had been transformed, featuring carefully selected pieces that would appeal to Boston's wealthy patrons. The star attraction, the recently discovered Monet, held pride of place. The provenance documents are perfect, she told Robert when he arrived for a final inspection. Even the experts are convinced. By the time they discover otherwise, the money will be clean and the painting will have, unfortunately, been damaged in transit to its new owner. Robert studied the painting with genuine appreciation. You've outdone yourself, sis. How many pieces are we moving tomorrow night? 6, Sophia smiled, adjusting her designer glasses. All authenticated masterpieces. All sold to carefully selected buyers who don't ask too many questions about where their money goes after the sale. And Victoria's role? The devoted wife, helping her husband's company support the arts, Sophia laughed. She's actually quite good at it. Sometimes I almost believe her myself. The next evening, Victoria stood beside James at the charity gala, playing her role to perfection. Her black evening gown drew admiring glances, while her attentive manner toward her husband inspired envy among the social circles she secretly despised. The Monet is extraordinary, she commented to James, leading him toward the painting. Sophia was so fortunate to acquire it. The authentication papers are impeccable. James studied the artwork with practiced interest, though his mind was clearly elsewhere. The company's donation will make a significant impact on the children's fund, he replied diplomatically. Victoria suppressed her irritation at his disinterest in art, reminding herself that soon it wouldn't matter. She caught Robert's eye across the room, where he maintained his trainer persona while mingling with other fitness-conscious socialites. I need to speak with the caterers, she excused herself, squeezing James's arm affectionately. The salmon puffs are disappearing too quickly. Instead, she found her way to a private corner where Robert waited. The brief encounter looked innocent to observers, a client consulting her trainer about exercise routines. The words they exchanged were anything but innocent. Everything's set, Robert murmured. Dominic's programs are in place. The moment the Harbor Heights transfers begin next week, our system activates. Victoria felt a thrill of anticipation. James signed the final authorizations today. He's focused on some new security protocols Patricia's implementing. They actually think they're protecting themselves. Any problems with Grace? Victoria's expression hardened slightly. My daughter's too busy with her architectural dreams to notice anything. James has her convinced she's the next Frank Lloyd Wright. And you're sure about this? Robert asked, studying her carefully. Once we move, there's no going back. Your life here, your relationship with Grace. I've been playing the devoted wife and mother for 17 years, Victoria interrupted, her voice cold. Grace chose her side the moment she decided to become James's protege instead of following my artistic path. As for James, she smiled, an expression that would have chilled her husband had he seen it. He's about to learn that not everything can be controlled, no matter how many contingency plans you make. They separated smoothly, returning to their respective roles. Victoria rejoined James, who was deep in conversation with some city officials about zoning regulations. She touched his arm possessively, maintaining their public image of marital harmony. Soon, she thought, watching him command the room with his usual authority. Soon you'll understand what it feels like to lose everything you've built. The thought gave her more pleasure than any of their years together had provided. The warning signs were there, though James Morrison's growing suspicions remained hidden behind his impassive exterior. The monthly poker game with Michael Torres provided a secure setting for sharing concerns, their friendship of 30 years allowing for candid conversation. "People don't change without reason," Michael commented, studying his cards while really watching James's reaction. Victoria's sudden interest in the business, these charity events she's organizing with Morrison Construction's backing. It's a pattern I've seen before. James raised the bet, his poker face revealing nothing. "Patterns interest you, detective?" "3 construction companies in the past 5 years," Michael continued, matching the raise. "All hit during major development projects. The method's sophisticated. By the time anyone realizes what's happened, the money's gone through so many channels it's practically untraceable." "And Victoria's art gallery connections?" Michael's expression tightened. "Sophia Reeves has appeared on our radar before. Nothing concrete, but there's a pattern of high-value art sales followed by questions about authentication. Perfect way to launder money, if someone were so inclined." Their chips clicked against the felt as they played, the conversation appearing casual to anyone watching. But both men knew the stakes were far higher than their poker pot. Grace's architectural competition was last week, James mentioned, dealing the next hand. Victoria missed it, claimed a charity event took priority. Michael's eyebrows rose slightly. "The same event where that Monet sold for $8 million? The timing was interesting," James agreed, his tone neutral despite the anger simmering beneath. Grace won first place. Victoria sent flowers the next day. The detective gathered his chips after winning the hand. "How did Grace take it?" "My daughter's stronger than people realize," James replied, his pride evident. "But she spent that evening in my office, working on new designs," said the studio she used to share with Victoria felt empty. Later that week, James watched Grace work at her drafting table, set up in the corner of his home office. Her natural talent had evolved into serious skill under professional tutoring, her designs showing a sophistication that belied her 15 years. "Mom's acting weird," Grace commented without looking up from her work. "She barely looks at my drawings anymore. Last year, she couldn't wait to see them." James moved to study the design she was perfecting. "Tell me about this one." "It's a community center," Grace explained, her enthusiasm pushing aside her concerns about Victoria. "See how the structure integrates with the existing park? The solar panels are disguised within the architectural elements, and these curves aren't just aesthetic. They channel natural light and improve energy efficiency." "Impressive," James noted, genuinely appreciating the technical skill and creative vision displayed. "Have you shown this to the Harbor Heights development team?" Grace's face lit up. "Really? You think it's good enough?" "I think it's exactly what the project needs," James smiled, one of his rare genuine expressions. "We'll set up a meeting next week." The moment was interrupted by Victoria's voice from downstairs. "James? Are you up there?" Grace's expression closed slightly, her pencil moving with more force than necessary. James squeezed her shoulder supportively before heading downstairs to find Victoria dressed for an evening out, her appearance as flawless as always. "Going somewhere?" he asked, noting details that others might miss. The particular perfume she wore only for special occasions, the subtle makeup that spoke of careful preparation. "Sophia's hosting a private showing," Victoria replied, checking her reflection. "Some potential buyers are interested in that new contemporary piece." James maintained his neutral expression. "The one with questionable provenance?" Victoria's pause was barely noticeable. "All the documentation is in order." "Really, James? Not everything needs your level of scrutiny." "Grace won first place in her competition," he said, watching her carefully. "The flowers were a nice touch." "Of course she did," Victoria smiled, though the expression didn't reach her eyes. "She's so like you, always planning, always building. Sometimes I hardly recognize my artistic little girl anymore." The words carried a subtle bite that James filed away with all the other evidence he'd been gathering. "Will you be late?" "Don't wait up," Victoria called over her shoulder, already heading for the door. I might meet some friends after the showing. You know how these art world gatherings can go. James watched her leave, noting the spring in her step that spoke of anticipation rather than simple social pleasure. Upstairs, he heard Grace return to her drafting table, the soft sound of pencil on paper carrying its own kind of comfort. His phone buzzed, a message from Patricia. The new security protocols were in place. Benjamin had finished restructuring the trust documents. Everything was ready. Another message followed, this one from Michael. Surveillance photos showed Victoria meeting Robert at their usual gym spot, their behavior notably more intimate than a trainer-client relationship would warrant. More photos documented meetings between Robert and Sophia, their sibling relationship obvious to those who knew to look for it. James poured himself a scotch, reviewing mental notes of Victoria's recent behavior. The missed events with Grace, the probing questions about company structure, the convenient timing of her charity galas with major business developments, all building to this moment, this week, when the Harbor Heights project would begin its first major fund transfers. His phone buzzed again. Victoria's message was typical of her recent communication style. Honey, I'm going on a wild date with my new lover. The words were chosen to hurt, to provoke an emotional response that might lead to mistakes. James read them with the same detachment he'd shown to hostile takeover attempts. You're married and have a kid to raise, he replied, making Victoria think her barb had struck home. Her dismissive response about Grace came quickly. She's practically grown. Besides, she's your daughter more than mine these days. James set his phone down, listening to Grace work upstairs. Victoria's words confirmed what he'd already known. This wasn't just about money. This was about destroying everything he'd built, including his relationship with their daughter. This is your final warning, he sent back, knowing she would interpret it as the desperate threat of a man losing control. Let her think that. Let her believe she had won. Victoria's reply came an hour later, after she'd left the gallery showing. Goodbye, James. Don't try to find me when it happens. Upstairs, Grace's drafting lamp still illuminated her work. James climbed the stairs quietly, not wanting to disturb her concentration. She'd moved on to a new design, this one incorporating elements of strength and security into its aesthetic appeal. Everything's ready, he thought, watching his daughter work. Let them make their move. Let them think they've won. The trap was set. All that remained was to watch it spring. The door closed behind Victoria with a finality that echoed through James Morrison's study. He remained seated at his desk, his expression carved from stone as he reached for his phone. A single text to Patricia Corden, scorched earth. The CFO's response came immediately. Executing Protocol 7. James activated his secure line to Benjamin Hawthorne. Begin the sequence. Already in motion, the lawyer replied, his voice tight with controlled anger. You should know, we've detected sophisticated probing of our trust structures over the past months. The attempts originated from inside our network. Victoria's access codes? Used as cover for something much more complex. Whoever's behind this has serious technical capability. They've been mapping our entire financial architecture. James's fingers drummed once on his desk, his only outward sign of tension. Activate the secondary protocols. I want every transaction from the past 3 years audited. All of them. Benjamin's surprise was evident. That's thousands of every single one. James's voice carried the weight of command that had built his empire. Start with the Harbor Heights project. Focus on subcontractor payments, material purchases, anything that could be manipulated without triggering immediate alerts. Patricia's voice cut in on the conference line. Emergency procedures are active. All accounts now require triple authentication for transfers. I've frozen the secondary channels and activated our ghost protocols. The trust documents? James asked. Sealed tighter than a nuclear bunker, Benjamin confirmed. Even I can't access them without 3 separate keys and your direct authorization. Grace's voice drifted down from upstairs, where she was still working on her designs. The sound hardened James's resolve. Patricia, initiate full surveillance on Victoria's known associates. I want every connection mapped, every financial transaction traced. Already done, Patricia replied. You should see what we've found on her art gallery friend, Sophia Reeves. The woman's been involved in some questionable authentication processes for high-value pieces. Keep digging, James ordered. Benjamin, activate our legal team. I want every contract, every document Victoria's touched in the past 5 years reviewed. Look for patterns, inconsistencies, anything that deviates from standard procedure. What about Grace's trust? Benjamin asked. Untouchable, James stated flatly. I want confirmation that all properties, including the house, are secured under her protection with Patricia as trustee. Done years ago, Patricia interjected. That refinancing paperwork Victoria signed? She never read the fine print. Everything's in Grace's name, managed through my office. Victoria's signature actually transferred her remaining rights to the trust. James allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. Years of preparation, layers of protection built like the foundations of his buildings. All of it ready for this moment. Sir, his security chief's voice came through the intercom. Detective Torres is at the gate. He says it's urgent. Send him up. Michael Torres entered the study with the focused energy of a man who discovered something significant. You need to see this. He placed a thick file on James's desk. We've been tracking unusual patterns in art sales across 3 states. High-value pieces changing hands through a network of galleries, including Sophia Reeves's establishment. James opened the file, studying the complex web of transactions Michael had mapped. Money laundering? On a massive scale, Michael confirmed. But that's not the worst part. Your wife's trainer? Richard Maxwell isn't his real name. My contacts in white-collar crimes ran as Prince. You're dealing with Robert Maddox, a sophisticated confidence man linked to major fraud operations across the country. The revelation didn't surprise James as much as it should have. In retrospect, the signs had been there. Victoria's sudden interest in his business, the convenient timing of Richard's appearance with the Harbor Heights project, the subtle probing of company defenses. How long have they been watching us? James asked, though he suspected the answer. At least 6 months before Victoria hired him, Michael replied. They're patient professional. They target major construction projects, the bigger the better. Harbor Heights would be their largest score yet. Patricia's voice came through the speaker. James, you need to see these transfer patterns. Someone's been testing our security, trying to find gaps in our authentication protocols. The attempts are sophisticated, military-grade encryption, bounced through multiple proxies. Their tech expert, Michael nodded. Dominic Walsh. He's a ghost in the system, but his work has a signature. We've seen it in 3 other construction company breaches. James stood, moving to the window where Boston's financial district spread out before him. His reflection showed a man ready for war. Patricia, implement the blackout protocols. I want every system locked down, every access point triple secured. No transactions proceed without direct authorization from both you and me. Already done, she confirmed. But James, there's something else. The subcontractor payment reviews we started, we've found discrepancies. $12 million worth. Benjamin's sharp intake of breath was audible over the line. How did they manage that? They didn't. James smiled coldly. Patricia's fail-safes caught the attempts. The funds were automatically diverted to our secure holding accounts, pending verification. They think they've succeeded, but they're actually trapped in our system. Michael raised an eyebrow. You expected something like this? I've expected betrayal every day since I watched my father's business partner destroy him, James replied, his voice carrying decades of learned vigilance. Victoria isn't just a socialite who fell for a con man. She's an active participant, chosen specifically because of her connection to me. The detective nodded slowly. The art gallery connections, the charity events, the gradual infiltration of your business circle, it's all been carefully orchestrated. They probably spent months profiling you before making their move. Let them think they've succeeded, James commanded. Patricia, maintain normal system responses. Make them believe their transfers are proceeding according to plan. Benjamin, prepare the documentation for full asset recovery. Michael, he turned to his old friend. I want everything you can get me on their operation. Every connection, every alias, every front company. What about Grace? Patricia asked softly. James's expression hardened further. My daughter is protected. Victoria's attempts to access any family assets will hit walls, she doesn't even know exist. The house, the cars, even her precious art studio, everything's locked in Grace's trust. She'll run, Michael predicted. Once they think they've secured the funds, they'll disappear. Probably have new identities already prepared. Let them try. James's voice carried absolute certainty. They think they're dealing with a successful businessman who's grown soft with wealth. They're about to learn what it means to betray James Morrison. The next hour was spent in detailed planning. Patricia initiated deep audits of every company system. Benjamin began preparing legal documents that would spring shut like steel traps when the time came. Michael coordinated with his contacts in financial crimes, building the groundwork for what would become a federal investigation. Through it all, James maintained his calculating calm, orchestrating the response with the same precision he'd used to build his empire. Each move was considered, each contingency planned for, each potential reaction anticipated. Upstairs, Grace continued working on her designs, unaware of the war being planned below. The sound of her music drifting down strengthened James's resolve. Victoria hadn't just betrayed him. She betrayed their daughter, abandoned her own flesh and blood for a con man's schemes. One last thing, James addressed his trusted lieutenants. From this moment forward, we operate on a need-to-know basis. Only the four of us know the full scope of our response. Let them think their plan is working. Let them believe they've beaten us. Michael stood, straightening his jacket. I'll start unofficial surveillance immediately. They'll never know they're being watched. Patricia, Benjamin, maintain normal operations. If Victoria or her associates make any inquiries, respond as you would have before. Let them think their infiltration is still secret. As his allies moved to execute their assigned roles, James remained in his study, reviewing years of preparation that were about to prove their worth. On his desk, Victoria's final message still glowed on his phone screen, a challenge she thought would break him, not realizing she'd just triggered a response that would destroy her entire world. Let them come, he thought, his mind already mapping out the moves and countermoves that would follow. Let them think they've won. The time for mercy, for second chances, for forgiveness, that was past. Now there would only be consequences, delivered with the same ruthless efficiency that had built Morrison Construction from the ground up. The war had begun, and James Morrison had never lost a war. Special Agent Rachel Martinez sat across from Detective Michael Torres in a secure conference room at the Boston FBI field office. The wall behind her displayed surveillance photos and financial diagrams tracking Robert Maddox's organization across multiple states. He's not working alone, Martinez explained, her laser pointer highlighting key connections. His tech expert, Dominic Walsh, has compromised systems at 3 other construction companies. They target businesses during major projects, when large fund transfers won't raise immediate suspicion. Michael studied the complex web of relationships. And Victoria Morrison? Carefully chosen, Martinez confirmed, pulling up Victoria's file. They profile potential targets for months. Morrison Construction's Harbor Heights project would be their biggest score yet. $500 million in total transfers. Perfect cover for large-scale fraud. James needs to know everything, Michael stated, his loyalty to his old friend evident. Martinez nodded, understanding the unofficial nature of their meeting. Officially, this is an ongoing federal investigation. Unofficially, she passed him a secure drive. Everything we have on Maddox's operation, including his connection to Sophia Reeves, the gallery owner, Robert's sister, Martinez revealed, bringing up another set of photos. She runs a sophisticated money laundering operation through art sales. High-value pieces with questionable authentications. Private buyers who don't ask questions. It's the perfect way to clean large sums. Back at Morrison Construction's headquarters, Patricia Corden worked through the night, her computer screens displaying complex financial data. Benjamin Hawthorne sat nearby, reviewing legal documents with focused intensity. Look at this, Patricia called, highlighting a series of transactions. The way they structured these subcontractor payments, it's brilliant in a twisted way. If we hadn't had the verification protocols in place. Benjamin moved to study the screen. They nearly got $12 million through before our safeguards caught it. The question is, do we let them know we've detected the fraud? James was clear. Patricia replied. Let them think they're winning. Every attempt they make reveals more of their network. The lawyer nodded, returning to his documents. The trust structures are holding. Victoria's attempts to access company assets keep hitting walls she didn't even know existed. The look on her face when she realizes all those refinancing documents she signed actually transferred everything to Grace's trust. Speaking of Grace, Patricia glanced at her watch. James is meeting with her now. She needs to understand enough to be protected, without knowing the full scope of her mother's betrayal. In James's office, Grace sat across from her father, her young face serious as she absorbed his carefully worded explanation. The company's going through some security updates, James explained, watching his daughter's reactions. I need you to be extra careful with any documents or information you have access to. No sharing designs or project details with anyone, including your mother. Grace's architectural sketches lay between them on the desk, her talent evident in every line. Is that why Mom's been asking about my Harbor Heights designs? James felt a surge of pride at his daughter's perceptiveness. You've noticed changes in her behavior? She's different, Grace admitted, her fingers tracing the edge of her drawings. The questions she asks, the way she looks at my work, it's like she's searching for something specific. In the art studio, she hesitated. She hasn't set foot in there for weeks. Trust your instincts, James advised, his voice gentle despite the rage he felt toward Victoria's manipulation. You have good judgment, Grace. Use it. Meanwhile, across town, Robert Maddox met with Dominic Walsh in their secure office. The tech expert's frustration was evident as he gestured at his screens. Something's wrong, Dominic insisted, pointing to lines of code. The transfers are going through, but there's a pattern I can't quite grasp. It's like the money's there, but not there. Robert leaned over the displays, his confidence showing the first hints of strain. Explain? The system accepts our commands. The transfers appear to process, but Dominic pulled up more data. There's an echo in the verification protocols. Something buried so deep I almost missed it. Can they trace it back to us? That's just it, Dominic frowned. The coding is extraordinary. Multiple layers of security, fail-safes I've never seen before. It's like the whole system was designed to... He stopped, realization dawning. Designed to what? Robert demanded. Designed to catch exactly what we're trying to do, Dominic whispered. James Morrison, he's not just some rich developer. He built his entire company like a fortress. Robert's phone buzzed, Victoria, messaging from another charity event. James suspects nothing, she reported. He's too focused on the Harbor Heights project to see what's happening. If she had seen her husband at that moment, directing his forces with military precision, she might have reconsidered her assessment. In his office, James coordinated with his team via secure channels. The FBI connection is unofficial, Michael reported. But Martinez is building a federal case. She's been tracking Maddox's operation for years. Sophia's gallery? James inquired. Central to their money laundering, Michael confirmed. High-value art sales, all with just enough documentation to appear legitimate. They've done this before, James. Multiple times. Patricia's voice joined the conference. The holding accounts are working perfectly. Every dollar they think they're stealing is actually trapped in our system, tagged and traced. The evidence trail is irrefutable. Benjamin, all legal preparations are complete, the lawyer reported. The moment we move, every asset will be frozen. Victoria's attempt to access company funds will trigger automatic lockdowns she doesn't even know exist. James absorbed the information, his mind calculating moves and countermoves. Maintain surveillance. Let them think their plan is proceeding. Every attempt they make adds to the evidence against them. Later that evening, Victoria returned home to find James in his study, apparently absorbed in Harbor Heights project documents. Her practiced smile revealed nothing of her true intentions. Working late again? She asked, her tone perfectly calibrated to seem caring. James looked up, his own expression giving away nothing of what he knew. Harbor Heights requires attention to detail. Every element must be precise. Victoria moved to perch on his desk, a familiar gesture that had once seemed intimate but now felt like an invasion. You work too hard, darling. You should learn to trust others more. Trust must be earned, James replied, the double meaning lost on his wife. Speaking of Harbor Heights, how was the charity event? I understand Sophia sold several pieces. Oh, you know how these things are, Victoria waved dismissively. The wealthy love to feel philanthropic while acquiring art. Everyone wins. James nodded, watching her with hidden knowledge of exactly how the money laundering scheme worked through these sales. And Richard? Still pushing you hard in training. He's very dedicated, Victoria smiled, missing the predatory gleam in her husband's eyes. In fact, I have a session early tomorrow. Don't wait up. After she left, James received another update from Patricia. The charity event sales have been traced. 5 pieces sold, all with inflated values and questionable authentications. The money's being routed through shell companies connected to Maddox's previous operations. Let them proceed, James commanded. Every transaction strengthens our case. In their secure office, Dominic worked frantically to understand the anomalies he detected. The system's like nothing I've seen before, he reported to Robert. Multiple layers of security, each one more sophisticated than the last. It's like trying to break into a digital fortress. Keep trying, Robert ordered, his own confidence showing cracks. We're too close to back out now. But James Morrison's preparations were proving more formidable than they'd anticipated. Each probe of his company's defenses, each attempted breach, each manipulated transaction, all were being meticulously documented, building an airtight case that would eventually destroy them. The war continued, invisible to most but fought with ruthless intensity. And James Morrison, the man they dismissed as a wealthy builder past his prime, was proving to be a far more dangerous opponent than they'd ever imagined. The following days revealed the true extent of James Morrison's preparations. Victoria's attempts to access company funds hit walls of paperwork she didn't even know existed, each failed attempt documented and added to the growing evidence against her. The house transfer alone is a masterpiece, Benjamin explained during a secure meeting in James's office. When Victoria signed those refinancing documents 3 years ago, she actually transferred full ownership to Grace's trust. Patricia's listed as trustee, with you as secondary executor. Victoria's name isn't on a single deed. James studied the legal documents with satisfaction. And the company assets? Protected by multiple layers of trusts, Patricia confirmed, pulling up detailed financial records. Even the Harbor Heights project has separate legal entities controlling each phase of development. They think they're stealing from the main company accounts, but they're actually trapped in our verification system. The CFO's screens displayed complex transaction logs. Look at this. They've already attempted to embezzle $12 million through manipulated subcontractor payments. Every dollar is sitting in our secure holding accounts, tagged and traced. The evidence trail is perfect. Michael Torres entered, carrying new surveillance photos. Martinez's team has been tracking their movements. Sophia's gallery is definitely their money laundering hub. They've sold over 20 pieces in the past month alone, all with questionable authentications. Victoria's involvement? James inquired, his voice cold. Active participant from the beginning, Michael confirmed. She was specifically chosen for this operation, James. Her social connections, her position as your wife. They've been planning this for years. Grace's voice drifted down from her upstairs workspace, the sound of her architectural software clicking as she refined her designs. The noise strengthened James's resolve. Show me the full financial structure, he commanded. Patricia brought up detailed diagrams on the main screen. The company's divided into multiple entities, each with its own security protocols. Even if they managed to breach one section, the others would automatically lock down. It's like a financial version of a nuclear submarine, multiple watertight compartments. The trust documents? James asked. Benjamin opened his legal files, layered like an onion. Each shell appears normal until you try to access it. Then you hit another level of security. Victoria's lawyers will spend years trying to unravel it, but Grace's inheritance is completely protected. And the Harbor Heights project? That's the brilliant part, Patricia smiled grimly. The $12 million they think they've stolen? It's actually providing us with a perfect record of their methods. Every transfer attempt, every account they've used, it's all being logged and verified. James studied the complex web of protection he'd built over years. Show me their latest attempts. Patricia brought up new data. They're getting frustrated. Their tech expert, Dominic Walsh, has tried to breach our secondary systems 4 times in the past 2 days. Each attempt was blocked and documented. He knows something's wrong, Michael added. Martinez's surveillance shows increased activity at their operations center. They're starting to realize they're not dealing with a normal corporate target. Benjamin reviewed more legal documents. The evidence we're gathering, it's beyond anything they could fight in court. Bank records, transfer logs, surveillance footage. Every attempt they make strengthens our case. And Victoria's personal assets? James inquired. Non-existent. Patricia confirmed with professional satisfaction. Everything of value is either company property or in Grace's trust. The art studio, she thinks, is her private sanctuary, listed as an educational facility under Grace's name. The cars? Company leased. Even her personal accounts are actually subsidiary to the main family trust. James allowed himself a moment of grim pleasure. She never read the documents, did she? People rarely do. Benjamin smiled coldly. She was so busy playing her role as the supportive wife. She signed everything we put in front of her. Each signature transferred more control to the trust structure. What about Robert's previous operations? James asked, turning to Michael. The detective brought up FBI files. 3 construction companies in the past 5 years. Same basic method. Identify a major project, infiltrate through personal connections, then strike during large fund transfers. But they've never encountered security like yours. Dominic Walsh's capabilities? Exceptional, Patricia admitted. But he's facing systems designed specifically to catch this kind of attack. Every time he probes our defenses, he leaves more evidence. Grace appeared in the doorway, architectural drawings in hand. Dad, I've finished the community center revisions. Do you have a minute? James's expression softened slightly. Always for you. Come show me. As Grace spread her designs across a side table, the others watched with mixed emotions. This was what they were really protecting. Not just money or reputation, but a future that Victoria had tried to destroy. Keep monitoring, James ordered his team quietly. Document everything. When we move, I want no possibility of escape. The meeting dispersed, each member returning to their assigned tasks. James remained with Grace, discussing her architectural innovations while his machines of justice continued grinding forward. Victoria's betrayal would be answered not with quick revenge, but with the same methodical precision that had built his empire. The trap was set, the evidence mounting, the noose tightening with each passing day. Victoria and her conspirators thought they were executing a brilliant plan. They didn't realize they were actually sealing their own destruction. James Morrison's hidden blade was not a single weapon, but an entire arsenal of legal, financial, and strategic preparations. When it finally struck, there would be no escape, no mercy, and no forgiveness. Special Agent Rachel Martinez studied the monitors in the FBI's mobile command center, tracking multiple surveillance feeds of Victoria Morrison's activities. Each screen displayed a different aspect of the operation they'd spent months building. Target is moving, her lead agent reported. She's entering Sophia Reeves's gallery for the private showing. Martinez nodded, her attention focused on the larger operation. Status on Walsh? Still at his workspace. He's been trying to access the diverted funds for 6 hours straight. In his secure office at Morrison Construction, James Morrison watched similar feeds alongside Patricia Corton. His CFO systems tracked every digital attempt Walsh made to breach their security. He's getting desperate, Patricia noted, pointing to the attack patterns. Look at these attempts. He's abandoned subtlety completely. James studied the data with cold satisfaction. Show me the holding accounts. Patricia brought up the financial displays. The $12 million Walsh and Maddox thought they'd stolen sat safely in protected accounts, each attempted access adding to the evidence against them. They still think they succeeded, Patricia explained. Every time they try to move the money, our system feeds them false confirmations while documenting their methods. The intercom buzzed. Sir, Detective Torres and Agent Martinez are here. James activated the secure conference room's protocols. Michael entered with Martinez, both carrying fresh intelligence. Walsh is leaving breadcrumbs everywhere, Martinez reported, spreading photos across the table. He thinks he's covering their tracks, but Patricia's security team has been documenting every move. The art gallery? James inquired. Michael pulled up surveillance images on the main screen. Sophia's hosting another private showing tonight. We've identified 6 pieces with fraudulent authentications. The buyers are all connected to previous money laundering operations. Victoria's role? She's been essential to their operation, Martinez confirmed. Her social connections gave them access to wealthy marks. The charity events provided cover for large transactions. But the gallery? She paused, bringing up financial records. That's where it gets interesting. James leaned forward. Show me. Sophia Reeves has been running this scheme for decades, Martinez explained. Forged artwork, inflated values, questionable authentications, all feeding into a sophisticated money laundering operation. The evidence stretches back 20 years. Patricia's computer chimed with an alert. Walsh is making another attempt. He's trying to access the Harbor Heights project accounts directly now. They watched as Walsh's increasingly desperate attempts bounced off their security protocols. Each failed access revealed more of his methods, his digital signature becoming clearer with every try. He knows something's wrong, Patricia observed. The funds aren't where they should be. He can see the transfers completed, but he can't actually access the money. Let him keep trying, James commanded. Every attempt strengthens our case. Martinez nodded approvingly. We've been tracking their operation for years, but they've never left such a clear evidence trail before. Your security systems are proving more effective than any trap we could have set. In his temporary office, Dominic Walsh fought growing panic as another access attempt failed. The screens around him displayed complex code structures he couldn't fully penetrate. Something's wrong, he reported to Robert Maddox via their secure line. The money's there, I can see it, but every time I try to move it, he gestured helplessly at his displays. It's like trying to grab smoke. At Sophia's gallery, Victoria circulated among wealthy patrons, playing her role of sophisticated art consultant. She didn't notice the undercover FBI agents posing as buyers, documenting every transaction, every conversation. The provenance on this piece is impeccable, she assured a potential buyer, indicating a supposedly recently discovered masterpiece. Sophia has connections with the finest authentication experts in Europe. The buyer nodded, secretly recording every word. In the FBI command center, Martinez added the conversation to their growing evidence file. They're actually documenting their own crimes, she remarked to James. Every sale, every fraudulent authentication, every money laundering transaction. It's all being recorded in real time. James watched the feeds with calculated patience. Show me the network analysis. Martinez brought up complex diagrams tracking connections between Maddox's various operations. Walsh's digital signature appears in multiple fraud schemes. Construction companies, art galleries, even some tech startups, all hit during major financial transactions. But they've never encountered security like yours, Michael added. Walsh's frustration is making him sloppy. He's leaving traces even a rookie could follow. Patricia's system pinged again. Another attempt to access the holding accounts. This time he tried to... Oh, this is interesting. She highlighted new data. He's finally realized something's fundamentally wrong with the transfers. Look at these diagnostic attempts. James studied the patterns. He's discovering our trap. Too late to help them. Martinez smiled grimly. We have everything we need. Digital forensics, financial records, surveillance footage. It's one of the strongest cases I've seen in 20 years with white-collar crimes. In the gallery, Victoria's phone buzzed with an urgent message from Robert. Walsh says something's wrong with the transfers. Get out now. But she couldn't leave without drawing attention. The gallery was full of potential buyers, all examining Sophia's carefully curated collection of forged masterpieces. Back in the command center, Martinez received updates from her team. Walsh is starting to delete files. He thinks he's covering their tracks, but every deletion attempt is being captured and preserved. Sophia's gallery? James inquired. Our agents have documented over 50 fraudulent sales in the past year alone, Martinez confirmed. The evidence goes back decades, false provenances, forged authentications, laundered payments through shell companies. It's a complete picture of organized crime in the art world. Patricia's screens lit up with new alerts. Walsh is making his move. Mass deletion attempts across their entire network. Let him try, James commanded. Every file he deletes is already preserved in our secure servers. They watched as Walsh frantically attempted to erase evidence of their operation, unaware that each action only strengthened the case against them. The trap had sprung perfectly, turning their own expertise against them. "Sir," Patricia called out, "Victoria just tried to access her private accounts." James nodded, unsurprised. "Show me." The screens displayed Victoria's growing panic as she discovered every account frozen, every asset locked down, every escape route closed. The walls of James Morrison's financial fortress were proving impenetrable. "It's time," Martinez announced, checking her tactical displays. "Teams are in position across 3 states." "On your word, Mr. Morrison." James studied the monitors showing his wife's increasingly desperate attempts to contact Robert, Walsh's futile efforts to delete evidence, and Sophia's continued sales of forged artwork. Everything was documented, everything preserved, everything ready for the final stroke. "Execute," he commanded, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Martinez spoke into her secure line. "All teams, Operation Artemis is go. Move in." The FBI takedown unfolded with military precision across 3 states. In his Cambridge office, Dominic Walsh's frantic deletion attempts were interrupted by the tactical team's entry. He barely had time to reach for his dead man switch before agents secured his hands behind his back. "Target 1 in custody," the team leader reported. In the mobile command center, Martinez watched the synchronized operation through multiple feeds. Status on the gallery? Teams in position, waiting for the next sale to complete. Inside Sophia Reeves's gallery, the evening's featured auction proceeded with artificial elegance. Sophia stood at the podium, unaware of the agents positioned among her wealthy clientele. "And now, ladies and gentlemen, our recently authenticated Monet." Her presentation was cut short by the tactical team's entry. "FBI, everyone remain where you are." Sophia's practiced composure cracked as agents secured the artwork and began corralling suspects. Her attempts to reach her phone were blocked by an agent in evening, who'd been posing as a buyer. "Sophia Reeves," Martinez's lead agent announced, "you're under arrest for fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy." At Morrison Construction, James watched the operation unfold alongside Patricia and Michael. His expression remained impassive as years of planning reached their culmination. "Robert and Victoria?" he inquired. Michael checked his tactical feeds. "Moving exactly as predicted. They're heading for Logan International. 3 cars, all tracked." James studied the airport surveillance. Robert had indeed arranged a private plane, ready for immediate departure. Victoria sat in the passenger seat of their lead vehicle, her usual poise replaced by barely controlled panic. "Their flight plan?" Patricia asked. "File for Toronto," Martinez replied through the secure line. "But the actual fuel load suggests the Cayman Islands. We have teams in both locations, plus their likely alternates." The convoy of escape vehicles approached Logan's private aviation terminal. Robert's face showed the first signs of real fear as the security codes failed to open the gate. "Something's wrong," he snapped at Victoria. "Call your contact in the tower." Victoria's trembling fingers dialed the number, but the phone only reached an FBI recording. Around them, unmarked vehicles moved into blocking positions. "The second car is trying to break away," Michael reported, watching the tactical feeds. "Let the chase unit handle it," Martinez commanded. "Main team, maintain position on the primary targets." Robert finally noticed the closing trap. His attempt to reverse was blocked by police vehicles appearing from hidden positions. FBI teams emerged from the surrounding buildings, weapons ready. "Robert Maddox," the tactical commander's voice boomed through speakers. "The building is surrounded. Exit the vehicle with your hands visible." In the command center, James watched his wife's face contort with the realization that every escape route was closed. Years of carefully maintained deception crumbled in moments. Victoria's desperate call came hours later from her holding cell. James let it ring through to voicemail, listening with cold satisfaction as she cycled through tears, rage, and bargaining. "James, please." Her voice cracked with desperation. "You don't understand. I was manipulated, used. I never meant to hurt you or Grace. Just talk to me, please." Patricia, reviewing the arrest reports, looked up at the sound. "She actually thinks she can talk her way out of this?" "She's always believed in her power to manipulate," James replied, his voice devoid of emotion. "Play the surveillance audio." The recordings filled his office. Victoria's conversations with Robert planning the fraud, her cold discussions about using Grace's trust to access funds, her laughter as she described James's apparent ignorance of their scheme. "The evidence is comprehensive," Benjamin confirmed, reviewing the legal files. Financial records, surveillance footage, digital communications. She was an active participant from the beginning. Michael entered with fresh intelligence. "Walsh is already offering to turn state's evidence. He's realizing exactly how much documentation we have." "And Sophia?" "Broken." Michael smiled grimly. "The FBI found records going back decades. Her entire art fraud operation is exposed. International authorities are already freezing accounts across 12 countries." James stood at his office window, watching FBI vehicles secure the private terminal. Robert and Victoria remained in separate holding cells, their carefully planned escape transformed into the closing act of their own downfall. "Sir," his secretary called through the intercom, "Grace is asking about her mother's arrest. The news is breaking on local stations." "Have her come to my office," James commanded. The time for shielding his daughter had passed. She deserved to understand the full scope of her mother's betrayal. Grace entered moments later, her young face showing a maturity beyond her years. "You knew," she stated, not asked. "You were ready for this?" "Yes," James confirmed, watching his daughter process the truth. The trust documents, the house transfers, all the legal papers Mom signed. Grace's analytical mind pieced together years of preparation. "You were protecting us all along." James moved to stand beside his daughter. "Everything is secured in your name, with Patricia as trustee. Your mother can't touch any of it." Grace nodded, her expression hardening with resolution. "Good." She chose her path. Now she can live with the consequences. The legal proceedings unfolded over 18 months, each hearing revealing new layers of betrayal and deception. James sat in the courtroom with cold satisfaction as Robert Maddox faced the full weight of federal prosecution. The defendant orchestrated a sophisticated criminal enterprise, the prosecutor detailed, targeting multiple construction companies through personal connections. The evidence shows a pattern of fraud, money laundering, and racketeering stretching back more than a decade. Robert's expensive legal team wilted under the mountain of evidence. Walsh's testimony, secured through a plea deal, provided technical details of their methods. Digital records documented every attempted theft, every fraudulent transfer, every breach attempt. The verdict came as no surprise. 25 years for multiple federal violations. Robert's confident smirk finally cracked as he was led away in shackles. Dominic Walsh's cooperation earned him a reduced sentence. His technical expertise turned against his former associates, helping prosecutors untangle the complex web of digital fraud. Sophia's art world empire crumbled spectacularly. International authorities discovered her gallery had been the nexus of a massive fraud scheme, selling forged artwork through a sophisticated laundering operation. The investigation led to indictments across the global art market. Victoria's trial proved the most satisfying for James. She sat in the defendant's box, designer outfit replaced by prison garb, as Benjamin's legal team methodically destroyed her claims of innocence. The defendant was not merely complacent, Benjamin argued, presenting surveillance footage. She was an active participant, chosen specifically for her connection to Morrison Construction. The evidence shows years of calculated deception. Victoria's tearful testimony about being manipulated by Robert collapsed under cross-examination. Benjamin played recordings of her planning sessions with Robert, her cold discussions about exploiting her marriage, her laughter at James's apparent ignorance. "Mrs. Morrison," Benjamin pressed, How do you explain your recorded statement about using your daughter's trust to access company funds? Victoria's carefully constructed facade of victimhood shattered. Her attempts to appeal to James in the courtroom met his impassive gaze. The divorce proceedings moved with unprecedented speed, supported by the criminal convictions. Victoria's claims to marital assets were systematically dismantled. Your Honor, Benjamin presented, the defendant's actions constitute a clear breach of fiduciary duty. The trust documents she signed, believing them to be routine refinancing papers, actually transferred all assets to her daughter's protected trust. The judge's ruling was unequivocal. Victoria would leave the marriage with nothing but her crimes. 8 years in federal prison gave Victoria ample time to contemplate her choices. Upon release, she found herself blacklisted from both the art world and Boston's social circles. Her attempts to contact Grace met swift legal response. Restraining orders and court injunctions erected an impenetrable barrier. James watched his empire grow stronger from the aftermath. Morrison Construction and Development doubled in size, the Harbor Heights project standing as a testament to resilience. The company's board expanded to include both Patricia and Michael Torres, the latter now retired from the police force and heading their enhanced security division. Grace, at 17, blazed her own trail at MIT's accelerated architectural program. Her designs caught the attention of major firms, combining her father's pragmatic strength with her own innovative vision. The time she once spent in Victoria's art studio was now invested in learning the construction business from James. In his new penthouse, overlooking the completed Harbor Heights development, James reviewed the latest project proposals. Grace's signature on the architectural plans promised a future built on stronger foundations than before. The business world whispered about the man who turned betrayal into triumph. His employees spoke with pride about his loyalty to those who stood faithful. But it was the precision of his revenge, the methodical destruction of those who tried to destroy him, that truly cemented James Morrison's reputation. Victoria's release from prison 8 years later meant nothing to the empire she'd tried to steal. Her attempts to rebuild her life met the same steel walls as her earlier schemes. The art world shunned her, social circles closed ranks, and her desperate letters to Grace returned unopened. From his office window, James could see the Boston skyline his company had helped shape. Each building stood as a monument to preparation, to the understanding that trust must be earned and betrayal must have consequences. The architectural plans on his desk, bearing Grace's distinctive style, promised new additions to that legacy. The war was over. James Morrison had not only defended his empire, he'd expanded it. The price of betrayal had been paid in full, measured in years of incarceration and permanent exile from the world Victoria had tried to manipulate. In the end, it wasn't the revenge that defined him, but the precision with which he'd protected his life's work. The business world learned a valuable lesson. James Morrison didn't just defeat his enemies. He erased them. Long epilogue. 5 years after Victoria's release from federal prison, James Morrison stood in his expanded office atop the Morrison Tower, the newest addition to Boston's skyline. At 55, his presence commanded even more authority than before, success and vindication having only strengthened his natural power. The Tokyo contract is ready for your signature, Patricia Corden announced, entering with her characteristic precision. Now Executive Vice President of Morrison Construction and Development, she'd helped double the company's international presence. Grace's design modifications? James inquired, reviewing the documents. Incorporated and enhanced, Patricia confirmed. The Japanese investors were particularly impressed by her integration of traditional elements with modern security features. At 25, Grace Morrison had emerged as one of architecture's rising stars. Her signature style, combining innovative design with impenetrable security, reflected lessons learned from both parents, though she'd long since rejected one of those influences. Speaking of Grace, Patricia continued, the restraining order violation report just came in. James looked up sharply. Victoria attempted to approach Grace at the MIT guest lecture series. Security intercepted her before she got within 50 feet. Michael's team handled it quietly. Michael Torres, retired from the police force and now Morrison Construction's global security director, had built an organization that made federal protection look amateur. His systems had tracked Victoria's every attempt to rebuild her life since release. "Show me the report," James commanded. Patricia brought up the details on her tablet. Victoria's latest attempt to contact Grace had been as pathetic as her previous ones. Once elegant designer clothes replaced by off-rack desperation, her attempt to blend in with the university crowd had fooled no one. "She's working as an art consultant at a strip mall gallery in Providence," Patricia noted, "trying to rebuild her connections, but—" She shrugged eloquently. "Your reputation ensures no legitimate gallery will touch her." And Robert, still serving his 25 years at Fort Dix. His latest appeal was denied last month. Dominic Walsh's testimony continues to shut down every legal avenue. James allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Walsh's deal had proven valuable. His technical expertise now helped protect other companies from similar schemes, while his testimony kept Robert Maddox firmly behind bars. Sophia Reeves? "The art fraud investigation is still expanding," Patricia reported. Interpol has traced connections to galleries in 6 more countries. They've recovered over $300 million in forged artwork so far. She's facing additional charges in France and Germany. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Morrison, your daughter is here." Grace entered, her professional attire and confident stride showcasing her evolution from teenage prodigy to accomplished architect. At 25, she'd already led major projects on 3 continents. "The Singapore proposal is ready," she announced, spreading detailed drawings across her father's desk. "We've integrated the environmental systems you suggested while maintaining the security protocols." James studied the designs with pride. Every line showed the precision he'd taught her, while the innovative elements proved she'd surpassed her teachers. "Have you seen the latest attempt?" he asked carefully. Grace's expression hardened. "Security handled it. I didn't even have to acknowledge her existence." She turned to Patricia. "Show him the Thompson Foundation designs." Patricia brought up Grace's latest project, a secure facility disguised as an art center. The irony of using Victoria's World of Art as cover for high-security installations had not been lost on any of them. "The Foundation's board approved it unanimously," Grace continued, purposefully moving past the topic of her mother. "Construction starts next month." A notification popped up on Patricia's tablet. The Hong Kong investors are ready for the video conference. And Benjamin sent an update on the European expansion. Benjamin Hawthorne, now Chief Legal Officer of Morrison's Global Operations, had turned the lessons of Victoria's betrayal into an ironclad legal framework. His team's protocols had become the industry standard for corporate security. "Put them through," James directed, moving to the conference area. Grace walked them through the security features. As Grace presented to the international investors, James reflected on the empire they'd built from betrayal's ashes. Morrison Construction and Development had expanded far beyond Boston, with offices in 12 countries and projects across the globe. The Harbor Heights development, their first major project after Victoria's betrayal, had become a template for secure luxury developments worldwide. Its success had attracted investors eager to replicate its combination of elegance and impenetrability. Later that evening, in his penthouse overlooking the city, James reviewed reports from Michael's security team. They tracked Victoria's increasingly desperate attempts to rebuild her life with methodical precision. Her latest art consultation business was failing, just like the 3 before it. Every potential client with significant resources received quiet warnings about her history. The art world's doors remained firmly closed, her expertise tainted by association with Sophia's massive fraud scheme. Robert's prison communications revealed his own growing desperation. His appeals exhausted, his outside resources drained by legal fees. He'd been reduced to writing a memoir that no reputable publisher would touch. The man who'd once commanded a sophisticated criminal enterprise now spent his days in a federal prison's general population. Dominic Walsh, having served his reduced sentence, now worked for a cybersecurity firm under strict supervision. His skills were valuable, but his reputation ensured he'd never again have access to significant financial systems. He served as a cautionary tale in corporate security seminars. Sophia's art fraud empire had crumbled completely. International investigations had exposed decades of forgery and money laundering. Museums and collectors worldwide were still discovering her fake masterpieces in their collections, each revelation adding years to her sentences in multiple countries. A message from Grace appeared on James's secure phone. Tokyo team loves the design. Dinner to celebrate? Your choice of restaurant? He replied, proud of her latest success. Grace had grown into everything Victoria had abandoned. Talented, disciplined, and absolutely loyal to the family legacy. She'd taken the art she once shared with her mother and transformed it into something stronger, just as James had transformed betrayal into empire. Victoria's latest financial records appeared in James's daily briefing. Her attempts to access old social connections had failed consistently. Former friends refused to acknowledge her, charity boards rejected her applications, and social invitations never arrived. The woman who'd once commanded Boston's elite social circles now lived in a modest apartment above a convenience store. Sir, his security chief called through the intercom. Ms. Winters attempted to send another letter to Grace's office. Standard protocol, James commanded. The letter would be documented and destroyed like all its predecessors. The contrast between his children's trajectories gave James particular satisfaction. Grace's success grew monthly, her designs reshaping skylines across Asia and Europe. Meanwhile, Victoria's only other child, a son born during her brief second marriage after prison, struggled with the stigma of his mother's notoriety. A report from Michael's team detailed Victoria's latest living situation. The Providence Strip Mall gallery barely covered her rent, forcing her to supplement her income with private art lessons to disinterested housewives. Her attempts to date had failed as potential partners discovered her history. James closed the reports, turning to the architectural plans spread across his desk. Grace's signature on the Tokyo project represented everything he'd fought to protect: talent, integrity, and the unshakable strength that came from understanding betrayal's cost. The empire he'd built with Patricia, Benjamin, and Michael had become something far greater than Victoria had tried to steal. Morrison Construction and Development now shaped the very definition of secure development worldwide. Their projects combined beauty with impenetrability, Grace's designs ensuring that every structure they built was both elegant and unassailable. From his penthouse view, James could see the lights of his buildings defining Boston's skyline. Each one represented a victory over those who'd tried to destroy him. Each success another reminder that betrayal carried consequences that echoed through generations. Victoria's betrayal had tested his empire's foundations and found them unshakable. In trying to destroy him, she'd only proved the wisdom of his preparations, the loyalty of his allies, and the strength of the legacy he'd built. Grace's dinner invitation reminded him of where true victory lay, not in Victoria's destruction, but in the stronger future built from her betrayal's ashes. His daughter had taken the artistic talent she'd inherited from her mother and forged it into something Victoria could never taint. The James Morrison of today commanded more than just a construction empire. He'd become a living legend in business circles, his story a cautionary tale about the price of betrayal and the value of preparation. Those who'd stood with him, Patricia, Benjamin, Michael, and Grace, had risen with his success, their loyalty rewarded with power and position. And somewhere in Providence, in a cramped apartment above a convenience store, Victoria Winters lived with the consequences of her choices. No second chances, no redemption, no forgiveness. Just the hollow echo of opportunities destroyed and a daughter's love forfeit. The empire hadn't just survived, it had transcended. And in the end, that was James Morrison's true revenge. Building something so magnificent from betrayal's ruins that even his enemies had to acknowledge its glory. Grace's success, Victoria's exile, Robert's imprisonment, Sophia's disgrace, all stood as testament to a fundamental truth. James Morrison didn't just defeat his enemies. He erased their very hope of redemption. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. and I'll see you there.